When I slid open the slim envelope from the university's financial office, I already knew what it contained. I'd grown far too familiar with rejection, not from the institution but from my own family. Inside was a formal notice. My tuition remained unpaid, and unless the balance was cleared within 10 days, I'd be dropped from the next semester. 10 days. After 3 years of maintaining perfect grades, juggling 2 part-time jobs, tutoring on weekends, and skipping every event that didn't include a scholarship, this was how it was going to end. Please subscribe to our channel and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. I stared at the letter, emotionless. I had pleaded with them before. Just 1 more semester, I'd said. Just until I graduate. Please. But their replies echoed through my memory like cold reminders. We're tight on money, sweetheart, my mother had said, using that tone she saved just for me. You know we have to cover your sister's Paris program. I wasn't shocked. Chloe merely had to mention a wish, and it would become reality by sunrise. She wanted a semester abroad to find herself, and suddenly there were non-refundable tickets to France, luxurious student housing, and chic luggage filling our driveway. Me. I had to submit a detailed request just to borrow $100 for lab supplies. I stopped expecting help a long time ago. But this, watching them let me sink while sipping wine in Paris with Chloe, this was my final straw. I didn't argue when I handed them the notice. I didn't cry. I simply folded the paper and said, "Thanks for making things clear." My father glanced up from his phone, already defensive, as if bracing for guilt. My mother exhaled loudly. "We're not made of money, you know." I didn't respond. No more calls. No text. No updates. If I didn't matter enough to them, then they didn't deserve my struggle. What they didn't expect was that I wouldn't quit. I never have. I went to the university office and laid out my case, not as a sob story, but with determination. A professor who had seen me thrive stepped in to advocate for me. Another connected me with a crisis scholarship fund. I filled out emergency aid forms, sold what I could, and picked up an overnight shift at a local print shop. I barely slept. Maybe 4 hours a night. My body ached, my brain screamed, but I stayed enrolled. Quietly, invisibly, and without a cent from the people who were supposed to back me. Meanwhile, their Instagram stories buzzed across my screen whenever I dared to check. Chloe sipping cocktails on the beach. My parents beaming beside her under the Eiffel Tower. #family over everything. The irony made me sick. When graduation day came, I didn't invite them. I didn't need applause from people who never believed I'd make it. Instead of inviting them, I arranged for 2 seats at the front, unlabeled but unmistakably reserved. I had a feeling they'd come anyway. Image had always mattered more to them than substance, and Chloe had likely slipped them the date when she flew home for summer break. When I emerged in my cap and gown, valedictorian, recipient of the department's highest honor in neuroscience, I scanned the audience and spotted them instantly. They were dressed like doting parents, trying to melt into a community they had never lifted a finger to support. That's when the real story began. My heels clicked sharply against the backstage floor as I stood in the wings, waiting for my name. The space buzzed with quiet anxiety, nervous chatter, the rustle of programs, the distant murmur of anticipation seeping through the curtain. But I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even thinking about the speech. My mind was fixed on those 2 front-row seats. They'd come. Course they had. I recognized my mother's high-pitched, rehearsed laugh, the one she used around wealthy strangers. My father had even worn a suit. He hadn't bothered with one at my high school graduation, arriving late and leaving before my name was called because the office couldn't wait. I guess he thought that showing up now would rewrite history. But I remembered. Every missed recital, every science fair they ignored, every sarcastic shrug when I outshone Chloe, it all sat fresh in my bones. Now here they were, sitting where support was meant to be, likely waiting for their names to be mentioned in gratitude. But I'd reserved those seats for a reason. Valedictorian of the graduating class, the dean announced, a student whose resilience, intellect, and integrity embody the spirit of this institution, Please welcome Samantha Lee Carter." The auditorium erupted in applause. I inhaled deeply, stepped onto the stage, and locked eyes with them. My mother's grin faltered. My father narrowed his eyes, as though trying to match the image to a memory. Chloe sat beside them, clutching her phone, mouth slightly open in disbelief. I crossed the stage without a wave, without a smile. I accepted the scroll, shook the dean's hand, and stepped to the podium. This was my moment. Not for revenge, but for truth. "Thank you," I said, voice steady. "This path wasn't smooth or simple or always just. But I stand here today because of the people who chose to believe in me when others chose to leave." Soft applause followed. I saw my parents lean in, waiting for their moment in the sun. "I'm grateful to my professors," I continued, nodding at Dr. Miller, who had stayed late night after night to help me untangle research data. To the donors who showed up when others disappeared. The cafeteria staff who noticed I hadn't eaten, when I smiled and said I had. The strangers who offered patience when those closest to me refused to understand. Silence followed. Not discomfort, just stunned, respectful quiet. "I wasn't raised in a household that honored effort," I said, my eyes drifting to the front row like a spotlight turning on. "They honored image. A curated life made for Instagram." Chloe's face flushed. My mother shifted in her seat, picking at her bracelet. My father kept his eyes forward, his jaw tight. "They said tuition was out of reach," I continued, my voice steady. "Then boarded flights for photo ops in Paris. They told me I was being dramatic, that I didn't deserve special favors. But education isn't a privilege. So right. And I claimed it, without their help." Gasps rippled through the audience, followed by the sound of applause. Real, spontaneous applause. The kind that said, "We see you. We believe you. You were never alone." I stepped down before the clapping quieted. I didn't glance back. After the ceremony came the reception. I laughed with classmates, posed for pictures with professors, and soaked in the warmth of people who had shown up with hearts wide open. I felt their eyes on me from across the room, my parents standing near the exit like guests who had wandered into the wrong celebration. They started toward me. My father opened his mouth, maybe to explain, maybe to excuse. I walked right past. "Wait," my mother called. "We came. We were here. So was everyone else," I said, pausing only for a beat. "The difference is, they earned it." Chloe said nothing. For once she had no quip, no defense. Just a blank look and guilt in her posture. But I wasn't chasing apologies. I didn't need closure from them, because I had already found it. What they didn't know was that the alumni office had reached out before graduation. I'd accepted a position at a research institute in another state, one that included housing, stability, and space from them. A week later, I mailed them a copy of the tuition invoice they had ignored. Taped to it was a note that read, "Paid in full. Not by you. Never needed you." They never replied. I didn't expect them to. Sometimes silence is the most telling answer of all. The months that followed were the beginning of something new. At the institute, people saw me for my ideas, my discipline, my contributions. Not as someone's sibling, not as the Carter family's second thought. I was just Samantha Carter. Oh, respected. I never heard from them again. No calls. No forced attempts to reconcile. And that, oddly, felt like peace. Then one day, I got a message from Mrs. Tilda, our old neighbor who used to bring warm banana bread on rainy afternoons. She told me my parents had sold the house. Financial trouble, she said. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. What stayed with me wasn't the sale. It was the fact that they hadn't told me. I was no longer even included in their downfall. I had been edited out of their story completely. I expected bitterness, maybe even triumph. But what I felt was something purer. Relief. I boxed up my college mementos. Photos, honors, and the letter from my mentor describing me as one of the brightest minds he'd worked with in 20 years. Not as proof for others, but as quiet affirmations for myself. Evidence that I'd made it, that I'd built something lasting, Without shortcuts, without favors, and without them. In the end, I didn't need revenge. I just needed to win. And in that deep, echoing silence between us, I realized this was the most honest conversation we'd ever had.